午间中文。我是申展. My name is 申展. Together with my two colleagues today from our Confucius Institute, 燕杰.
Hi, 大家好.
And 李月.
Hi, 大家好.
Thanks for joining this Read-Aloud series, a journey of practicing Chinese pronunciation while learning its culture, literature, history, geography, and more through reading poems in Chinese together. In today's session, we will read a short poem with only 20 Chinese characters by yet another master poet from the Tang Dynasty. A Zen Buddhism devotee, his poems are often very simple, direct, yet deeply and profoundly spiritual. So give me 1 second to share my screen. And also I just want to add there is only so much we can cover in 30 minutes, and I would encourage you to explore classes through our school that includes a lot of language classes with various levels from beginners to advanced. So from language to classical and contemporary, Chinese literature, Dao De Jing, and Chinese music, and soon calligraphy. So all classes will be online this summer and fall. Now, let's take a look at the poem we are going to read today. You can read after me, pay attention to the pronunciation, and read as closely as you can. As I mentioned earlier, we have to mute everybody for the half of the Read-Aloud together session just to block the background sound. But you can hear yourself, and please read after me as closely as you can. All right. 陆寨. The author is Wang Wei. Pay attention to the text in English. Also, we will not spend a lot of time to explain in English, but by providing the text in English, I hope it serves the purpose of getting the meanings of messages across. I don't have a photo of Wang Wei, nor a painting of him, because Wang Wei was not only a poet, but also an artist who founded the Southern School of painter-poets, known by his landscape paintings. In fact, the poem that we are reading today, 陆寨, is part of a massive horizontal landscape scroll of various sites near the Wang River, Wangchuan, where Wang Wei retired after a major rebellion in Tang Dynasty from 755 to 759. That is, some of you, if you're familiar with Chinese history, that is Anshi Zhiluan, Anshi Rebellion, a major disruption during the Tang Dynasty. So I'm showing here what you're looking at is actually part of the scroll. It's a duplicate by an artist named Guo Zhongshu from Song Dynasty over 200 years later. It is an evidence of Wang Wei's influence among painters in China's history. The original by Wang Wei has never been found yet. I hope one day it actually will turn up in some archaeological excavation. In this scroll, you can see 陆寨 is depicted here with some small deers here and there, and the character for the place, 陆寨, is in fact written up there. Zhai means park or grove. However, if we go back for 1 second, you can see in Burton Watson's translation, it's translated as deer fence. one might think that the title may, well, Watson may get the idea from this painting because, well, the deers are, in fact, behind a fence. I just want to quickly show the entire scroll, the massive scroll that, oops, sorry, you will see here. This is the entire scroll. So the way, just briefly, to look at a Chinese traditional brush painting scroll is from the right to the left. So from the very right, we can see the title here. And there's a seal actually from an emperor in 18th century, Qianlong. He has the habit of putting his seals on his collections. So if we go this way, we can see there are, in fact, 20 places in the painting. Each of them is marked by its name. The first one here, the second one here, and if we go this way, we will eventually get to see Lu Zhai here. So at the end of this scroll, Wang Wei, in fact, has written one poem for each of the 20 places in this scroll. So in this version, which is a duplicate by Guo Zhongshu, there is a section attaching all the 20 poems written by Wang Wei. The calligraphy is not by Wang Wei, but we can find the poem here. This is Lu Zhai. Lu Zhai, and that's the poem. And this is also representing one signature of the Southern School of Painting, which is to have poems along with the painting, and it's also called literati painting, 文人画. All right, let me go back to the slide. I cannot believe we haven't started reading the poem yet. All right, here we go. So I will read twice again. I will pause in the middle, and you can read after me, and then I will read it again, the entire line. Okay, here we go. 空山不见人，空山不见人。但闻人语响。So two third tones together, this one will change to the second. 人语响。但闻人语响。繁景. There's a debate whether this character should be pronounced as 景 or 影, depending on how much you want to emphasize also the different meanings of this character, whether focusing on the brightness of the sun or refers to the shadows. So in our reading, I will choose 景, 繁景。入深林，繁景入深林。复照，青苔上。复照 青台上. That's the poem. 20 characters. So you may be reminded that this is a 五言绝句, 4 lines only, so it's a quatrain, 绝句. 5 characters each line, it's a pentasyllabic quatrain, 五言绝句. So shall we read this all together one more time? 鹿寨，空山不见人，但闻人语响。返景入深林，复照青台上。So on this slide, I want to invite you to pay attention to Watson's translation. I came across a book, 19 Ways of Looking at Wang Wei, a book collecting 19 different translations, mostly in English, also in Spanish and French, of this very poem, 鹿寨. The authors are Elliot Weinberger, an American translator, writer, and essayist, and together with Octavio Paz, a Mexican Nobel Prize winner writer and poet. If you're interested, I highly recommend this book. It's very easy to read, and I was particularly enjoying the commentaries by the authors of the translations, sometimes hilarious. So in this book, it says, his, meaning Watson, his presentation of the image is as direct as the Chinese. There are 24 English words, 6 per line, for the Chinese 20. Yet every word of the Chinese has been translated without indulging, as others have done, in a telegraphic minimalism. In the translation of Chinese poetry, as in everything, nothing is more difficult than simplicity. So going back to the first Tang Dynasty poem we read, 杜甫, we mentioned each character is a very much packed image. So it really conveys a lot of meaning. And that's the way I want to emphasize how we appreciate a good translation that would transcend the beauty and also be truthful and loyal to the original version. Here, I also want to share Paz's translation in Spanish in case anyone reads. I unfortunately cannot. And also its English translation. I want to just pause for 30 seconds, and you can see how different this translation is from Burton Watson's. By the way, it's the 3rd version by Paz of the poem. Note in this translation, he uses Western light versus late sunlight. That goes back to the Chinese 返景. And also, he used illuminates instead of shining. And you may wonder, and I was wondering too, why the obsession with this short poem? Yes, it may rhyme beautifully, feels peaceful, but it's describing a simple natural scene written 1200 years ago. A mountain, seemingly no one, yet someone, a forest, the setting sun shining on a patch of moss. What's the big deal? And even the title. What's the story about the deer park or the deer fence? I learned this poem in elementary school, like many children in China now, studying this poem at 3rd grade, as it's required by the national curriculum. I enjoy reading this poem and many of Wang Wei's poems, but this past weekend, as I was preparing this session and reread the poem, along with the 19 different translations, I suddenly learned something new. First, I found out there's a user raised hand. We can address some of the questions later. We will give some time at the end of the session. And also you can put your question in the chat box. In that way we can address that as well later. So first I found out there might be a connection between the title Lu Zhai with the deer park in Sarnath, India, where the Gautama Buddha delivered his first teaching. That brings up the spirituality of this poem. And as during the introduction, we know that Wang Wei is a devoted Zen Buddhist. So the spirituality of the poem, I think, is best summarized in the afterword by Octavio Paz in the book. I can't say it more beautifully. I will just read it aloud here. One might say that the western sun is the spiritual light of the paradise of the West. The solitude of the mountain and the forest is this world in which there's nobody really, though we hear the echoes of voices, and the clearing in the forest illuminated by the silent ray of light is the one who meditates and contemplates. So to me, my new way of understanding the poem is by capturing the concrete moment of the natural scene. Wang Wei, who's a Zen master himself, was really speaking of the moment of enlightenment. In this world, we only encounter reflections and echoes, like the voices in the empty mountain. Occasionally, or momentarily, the spiritual light might shine on one's heart. So with that, I would invite you to read the poem again with me without pinyin. 鹿寨，王维。空山不见人，但闻人语响。返景入深林，复照青苔上。So here is our contact information and the time for next session.